Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're going to help you navigate some dense topics. Today, we're tackling The 4-Hour Body by Timothy Ferriss.
It's a fascinating exploration of biohacking and unconventional methods.
It's kind of like having a cheat sheet to hack your body. Think rapid fat loss, better sleep, even better sex.
All through techniques you wouldn't expect.
We're talking about some seriously impacting your physique.
With just 4 hours a month at the gym.
And using cold exposure to actually help you lose weight.
Yeah, it challenges a lot of conventional thinking about fitness and health.
So get ready for some surprising discoveries. The book dives right into challenging how we think about exercise.
It argues that spending hours at the gym isn't the only path to transformation.
Right, it's more about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. Ferriss emphasizes the minimum effective dose, or MED.
So like the bare minimum you need to do to see those gains.
Precisely. It's about finding the least amount of exercise needed to get the physiological response you're after.
He even shares how he gained significant muscle, like a lot of muscle.
With just 4 hours of training over an entire month.
4 hours? That's wild. Does he back this up with research?
Oh, absolutely. The book cites studies that support this minimalist approach.
Okay, so less is more. And this unconventional thinking, it's not just about exercise.
It extends to his diet recommendations as well, particularly the slow-carb diet.
So tell me about it. What are the guidelines for this slow-carb diet?
Well, it revolves around simple rules, consistent habits,
And the goal?
manipulating your insulin response, and optimizing your metabolism.
Sounds complex.
It's actually pretty straightforward. The first rule is to cut out white carbs.
White carbs, so like white bread and pasta?
Exactly. Also, white rice and potatoes. The second rule is to stick with eating the same meals repeatedly.
Sounds a bit boring.
I know, right? But it helps a lot with portion control and, well, it simplifies meal planning.
Consistency is key. Any other restrictions I should be aware of?
Yeah, 2 more big ones. You don't drink any calories.
So no sugary sodas.
Nope. And no fruit either.
Wait, no fruit, but fruit's supposed to be healthy.
Ferriss argues that minimizing fructose intake can help with fat loss.
Huh, that's kind of counterintuitive.
Hmm.
So lots of protein, limited carbs, no fruit. It all sounds pretty restrictive.
Well, it's not all deprivation. There's a weekly cheat day.
Okay, now you're talking. Tell me more.
You can eat whatever you want 1 day a week.
Ah, so there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I can definitely get behind that. Does he explain why the cheat day is important?
Yeah, it supposedly helps prevent plateaus and actually resets your metabolism.
Interesting. So it's not just about what you eat, but also when you eat it. And he doesn't just stop at diet and exercise, right?
No, he takes it a step further. He's big on self-experimentation and tracking data. He calls it biohacking.
So like becoming your own scientist.
Exactly. He uses things like a continuous glucose monitor.
What's that?
It tracks his blood sugar levels. He can see exactly how different foods affect him.
Wow. So he can tailor his diet based on real-time data? Pretty cool. And this biohacking, it extends to other areas of his life too.
Yeah, he applies it to everything, from productivity to sleep and even sex.
We got to talk more about that later. But first, sleep. The book spends a lot of time talking about how important sleep is.
He really does, and he offers some pretty interesting techniques for improving sleep quality.
Like what? Spill the secrets?
He uses things like the Zeo Sleep Monitor. It tracks your sleep patterns. He also recommends, get this, cold exposure.
Wait, cold exposure for sleep? You're kidding me.
Nope. Research suggests that cold can help you regulate your body temperature and release sleep-inducing hormones.
Huh. So cold showers might actually be the key to a good night's sleep. And he gets even more unconventional with his sleep methods, right? Like,
You're thinking of polyphasic sleep.
yeah, that's it. Sleeping in multiple short bursts throughout the day.
Exactly. The idea is to reduce your total sleep time while potentially getting more REM sleep.
So it's like hacking your sleep schedule for maximum efficiency. I'm not sure I could handle that. It sounds pretty intense.
It's definitely not for everyone, but it's an interesting example of how he pushes the boundaries of what's possible.
And speaking of pushing boundaries, his approach to optimizing sex is, well, pretty interesting too. He calls it the sex machine protocol.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole. It combines specific dietary changes, cold exposure.
Cold exposure again. Is
Yeah,
there anything it doesn't help with?
and he uses supplements too. The whole thing is designed to improve sexual performance and boost testosterone.
Okay, I'm definitely curious to hear more about that. What kind of dietary changes does he suggest?
You might be surprised. He recommends eating a lot of saturated fat.
Saturated fat? I thought that was bad for you.
It's gotten a bad rap, but Ferriss thinks it's essential for testosterone production.
Wow. Okay. Anything else?
This one might sound a little out there. He also says to minimize your exposure to cell phone radiation.
Cell phone radiation. Seriously.
He believes it can actually negatively impact sperm count.
That's wild. I never would have thought of that.
Mhm.
So he's really connecting the dots between all sorts of different things.
And he's always questioning conventional wisdom. He encourages people to think outside the box.
And it's not just about sex and sleep and diet. He even talks about how to reverse permanent injuries.
Yeah, he delves into some alternative therapies like the ego ski method and active release technique, or RT.
What are those?
They focus on addressing underlying imbalances in the body, like postural misalignment or tight muscles. He also talks about prolotherapy.
I'd never heard of that.
It's an injection therapy that stimulates the growth of new connective tissue. It's supposed to be good for strengthening ligaments and tendons.
So he's saying we have more power to heal ourselves than we realize.
Exactly. And he doesn't just talk about these therapies, he's actually tried them himself.
Really? So he puts his money where his mouth is.
He does. He shares his personal experience with overcoming chronic pain and injury using these methods.
It's pretty inspiring. It shows that you don't always have to accept limitations.
That's really at the heart of the 4-hour body philosophy. It's about pushing boundaries and challenging conventional thinking.
It's about taking control of your own health and experimenting to find what works best for you. So what are some of the biggest takeaways that stand out to you from the book?
Well, one of the most important is this idea of the minimum effective dose. Finding that sweet spot where you get the biggest bang for your buck. It applies to exercise, diet, everything. Another key takeaway is the power of self-experimentation.
Right, tracking data, figuring out what works best for your unique body. It's all about personalization.
Exactly. And I think Ferriss's willingness to challenge the status quo is really valuable. It encourages people to question assumptions and be open to new possibilities.
It's an invitation to think outside the box and explore alternative approaches. Sounds like there's a lot to unpack here.
There is. The 4-hour body is packed with information, anecdotes, and experiments. We've only just scratched the surface.
So are you ready to dive into some specific examples and dig a little deeper?
Let's do it. In the next part, we'll explore some fascinating case studies and research that bring these unconventional methods to life. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the 4-hour body. Let's look at some of the compelling examples that really highlight Ferriss's, well, unconventional approach.
Okay, like what?
Well, one that really stands out is this whole idea of gaining muscle with minimal gym time.
Yeah, that one sounds almost too good to be true.
Right, it goes against like everything we've been told about needing to spend hours working out to get results.
Right, exactly.
So to illustrate this point, Ferriss uses the story of his friend, Chad Fowler.
Who's Chad Fowler?
He's a software engineer who was inspired by this idea of minimalist fitness.
And how did that work out for him?
Well, Chad, like many people, struggled with, his weight and fitness. He tried different diets, exercise programs, but nothing really stuck,
Sounds familiar.
right? But then he had what Ferriss calls a Harajuku moment.
Harajuku moment. What's
Yeah.
that? So picture this. Chad's visiting Tokyo, specifically the Harajuku district, which is known for its, unique fashion and confident people.
Okay.
And it kind of hits him that he wants that same level of confidence in his own body.
So this was like an epiphany for him.
Exactly. It was a turning point. And he decided to embrace, small, consistent changes.
Okay, so he has this realization. What was his first step?
Something super simple, actually. He started weighing himself every day.
Just weighing himself.
Yeah, and writing down the number. It sounds basic, but this one little act of awareness, it actually led to him making healthier choices throughout the day, subconsciously.
Huh. So, just by acknowledging his weight, he started eating better without even really trying.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right? And then he gradually incorporated other healthy habits, like eating breakfast soon after waking up.
Oh, yeah, that's supposed to be good for your metabolism.
Right. And he focused on eating more frequent, smaller meals throughout the day instead of the traditional 3 big meals.
So he wasn't starving himself or anything.
No, it was all about building sustainable habits. No crazy diets, no grueling workouts.
So did he ever start exercising?
Oh, yeah, eventually. But again, he challenged the traditional way of doing things. He followed a program called Occam's Protocol.
Occam's Protocol. That sounds intense.
It actually embraces that MED principle we were talking about earlier.
Oh, right, the minimum effective dose. So what does that look like in practice?
So the program focuses on compound exercises.
Like what?
Squats, deadlifts, bench presses, that sort of thing. And you perform them with a really slow, controlled tempo until you hit complete muscle failure.
Muscle failure, so like you can't do another rep.
Right. And get this, you only do one set.
Wait, just one set per exercise?
Yeah, the idea is to maximize muscle growth with like the least amount of time actually lifting
This is
weights.
kind of like quality over quantity.
Exactly. And it actually helps reduce the risk of injury.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
And did this approach actually work for Chad?
It did. He made significant gains in muscle mass and strength.
Wow. So even though he wasn't spending hours at the gym, he was still seeing results.
Exactly. And he had very little experience with weightlifting before this.
That's pretty amazing. It really shows that you don't need to follow the conventional wisdom to get fit. Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about the slow-carb diet. It also kind of goes against everything we think we know about dieting.
It does. And it's definitely sparked some debate. But a lot of people have actually found it to be really effective.
Okay, so let's break down the rules.
Sure.
No white carbs,
Right.
repetitive meals,
Uh-huh.
no calorie-laden drinks,
Got it.
no fruit,
Yep.
and a weekly cheat day. It seems simple enough, but I'm sure there's more to it.
Yeah, it's important to understand the nuances. That's the key to getting the benefits and avoiding some of the common mistakes that people make.
Okay, so let's start with white carbs. Why are they off limits?
It's all about managing your insulin response. White carbs, they're typically refined and stripped of their fiber.
So we're talking white bread, pasta, rice,
Yeah.
potatoes.
Exactly. And this lack of fiber leads to these really rapid spikes in your blood sugar and insulin levels.
And those spikes are bad.
Right. If you have high insulin levels all the time, it can lead to something called insulin resistance.
What's insulin resistance?
It basically means your body's not as effective at using insulin. And that makes it way harder to burn fat. And it increases your risk of developing, metabolic disorders like type 2 diabetes.
Oh, wow. So the goal of the slow-carb diet is to keep those insulin levels stable.
Exactly. You want to choose carbs that digest slowly and don't cause those huge blood sugar swings.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're getting a steady release of energy throughout the day.
Exactly. The protein and legumes in the diet also help with that. They keep you feeling full and reduce cravings.
Okay, so I get the no white carbs rule. But what about this whole thing about eating the same meals repeatedly? That sounds incredibly boring.
It does, I know, but there's a strategy behind it.
Okay, I'm listening.
By sticking to a limited number of meals, you're making it way easier to manage your calorie intake and macronutrient ratios.
So you don't have to constantly think about what you're eating.
Right. It eliminates decision fatigue and
Yeah.
guesswork.
That's definitely a plus. Okay, so what about the no fruit rule? I mean, fruit is supposed to be healthy, right?
It is, yeah. Fruits are packed with vitamins and minerals.
And antioxidants.
Right. But Ferriss believes that fructose, even the natural kind, can hinder fat loss.
So even though it's coming from a healthy source, it can still mess with your progress.
That's his thinking, yeah. And it's definitely a controversial point. But there is some research suggesting that eating too much fructose, especially from sugary drinks and processed foods, can lead to metabolic problems.
So it's something to be mindful of, even if you don't cut out fruit entirely.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to another area where Ferriss gets really creative. Sleep optimization.
Ah, yes, the sleep fanatic himself.
It seems like everyone's struggling to get enough sleep these days. What are some of the hacks he recommends?
Well, first of all, he takes a data-driven approach. He uses tools like the Zeo Sleep Monitor, which we talked about earlier, to really understand his sleep patterns.
So he can track how much deep sleep he's getting and all that.
Right. And then he can identify areas for improvement. But he also recommends, and this might surprise you, cold exposure.
Cold exposure for sleep. We're back to that.
I know, right? It seems counterintuitive, but it can actually help regulate your body temperature and create a more relaxed state.
So it's like prepping your body for sleep.
Exactly. And there's actually research to back it up.
Interesting. So what else does he recommend for better sleep?
Well, he's big on light exposure, especially in the morning. Getting sunlight first thing when you wake up can really help reset your circadian rhythm.
Oh, yeah, your internal clock.
Right, it helps you sleep better at night. He even recommends this light therapy device called the Philips Go Light, which simulates sunlight.
So you can kind of trick your body into thinking it's daytime.
Exactly, but he doesn't stop there. He also explores more extreme sleep patterns, like polyphasic sleep.
Oh, yeah, polyphasic sleep, the ultimate sleep hack. Remind me how that works again.
So, polyphasic sleep involves taking multiple short naps throughout the day instead of one long sleep at night.
Okay, and the goal of that is?
To reduce your overall sleep time while potentially increasing the amount of REM sleep you get.
So you're supposedly more alert and productive.
That's the idea, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's pretty demanding. It requires sticking to a very specific schedule.
Yeah, I can imagine. Not exactly conducive to a normal lifestyle.
Right. It can really disrupt your routine, and there's not a ton of research on the long-term effects.
So it's kind of risky?
It can be, yeah. It might make you feel great, or it might leave you completely exhausted.
Sounds like a gamble.
It is, yeah.
Okay, well, even if I'm not ready to jump on the polyphasic sleep bandwagon, I think the point about sleep optimization is well taken. It's something we all need to pay more attention to.
Absolutely. Good sleep is essential for, well, just about everything.
Okay, let's move on to another spicy topic. The sex machine protocol. It's definitely one of the more attention-grabbing parts of the book.
It is, yeah, and it involves some, well, unconventional ideas about boosting testosterone and improving sexual performance.
So what exactly does this protocol entail?
Well, it's actually a multifaceted approach. It combines dietary changes, cold
Are
exposure,
you sensing a theme here?
huh, and supplements.
Okay, break it down for me. What kind of dietary changes are we talking about?
One of the biggest ones is increasing your intake of saturated fat.
Hold on. Saturated fat. Isn't it supposed to be bad for you?
It has a bad reputation, yeah. But Ferriss believes it's vital for testosterone production.
Interesting. Okay, what else?
This one's a bit more unusual. He recommends minimizing your exposure to cell phone radiation.
Seriously. What's
Yeah.
the connection there?
He thinks cell phone radiation might have a negative impact on sperm count.
Wow. Okay, that's unexpected.
Right. It just goes to show how he connects the dots between all these seemingly unrelated things.
It's all about thinking outside the box.
Exactly. And challenging conventional wisdom.
So it's not just about popping a pill or something. It's about making lifestyle changes.
Right. And experimenting to see what works for you.
Okay, let's talk about injury recovery. Ferriss claims that a lot of injuries that are considered permanent can actually be reversed.
He does. He dives into some alternative therapies that are often overlooked by conventional medicine, like the Egoscue method and active release technique.
Okay, remind me what those are again?
So the Egoscue method focuses on postural alignment. The idea is that imbalances in one part of your body can create pain and dysfunction in other areas.
So it's about getting everything back into balance.
Right. And RT, active release technique, it's a hands-on therapy that targets adhesions in the fascia.
Fascia.
It's a connective tissue that surrounds your muscles and organs.
Oh, okay. I never really thought about that as a potential source of pain.
It can be, though. If it gets tight or restricted, it can limit your range of motion, cause pain, and even affect nerve function.
So RT helps to break up those adhesions.
Exactly. And then there's prolotherapy.
Prolotherapy, yeah. What is that exactly?
It's an injection therapy that uses a special solution to stimulate the growth of new connective tissue. It's supposed to be helpful for strengthening ligaments and tendons.
So it's like rebuilding those damaged tissues from the inside out.
Exactly. And Ferriss doesn't just talk about these therapies. He's actually tried them himself. He shares his personal experiences in the book.
Really? So he's speaking from experience.
He is. And it's pretty compelling stuff. He talks about how he overcame chronic pain and regained function using these methods.
It's pretty inspiring. It shows that you don't always have to settle for limitations.
Right. There's often more that we can do to heal ourselves.
So what are some of the biggest insights that you've taken away from the book so far?
Well, I think one of the most important is this emphasis on the minimum effective dose. It's about finding the sweet spot where you get the maximum benefit with the least amount of effort. And it applies to so many areas of life.
Right. It's not about working harder. It's about working smarter.
Exactly. And another key takeaway is this whole idea of self-experimentation.
Right. Becoming your own scientist, tracking data, figuring out what works best for you.
Exactly. And I think Ferriss's willingness to challenge conventional wisdom is really valuable. It encourages people to question assumptions and explore new possibilities.
It's an invitation to think outside the box.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still so much to explore.
There is. The 4-Hour Body is a treasure trove of information and ideas.
Are you ready to delve into some of the more controversial aspects of the book?
Let's do it. In the next part, we'll discuss some of the potential risks and rewards of Ferriss's unconventional methods. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of the 4-Hour Body. And, well, we've talked about how some of Ferriss's recommendations are a little bit, shall we say, outside the mainstream.
Yeah, some of his methods have definitely generated some controversy.
So let's tackle a few of those head on. One that always raises eyebrows is his whole thing about saturated fat.
Yeah, that's a big one.
He talks about it in relation to the slow-carb diet.
And the sex machine protocol.
Right. It kind of goes against, like, decades of nutritional advice,
And
right?
it does. For years, we've been told that saturated fat is like the enemy. Clogged arteries, heart disease, all that.
But Ferriss flips the script. He argues that we actually need saturated fat for optimal hormone production, especially testosterone.
And he believes that, healthy hormone levels are crucial for overall health and well-being.
But the science on this is still pretty mixed, right?
It is. There's some evidence suggesting that moderate amounts of saturated fat might not be as harmful as we once thought.
But more research is definitely needed.
Definitely. And it's important to remember that Ferriss tends to push the envelope. His recommendations often go beyond what's considered like the safe zone by mainstream health experts.
So it's always a good idea to proceed with caution.
Absolutely. Talk to your doctor before making any major changes to your diet, especially if you have any underlying health conditions.
Right. It's always better to err on the side of caution. But even if you don't go all in on the high saturated fat thing, I think there's still value in Ferriss's emphasis on self-experimentation.
Yeah, I agree. It's about paying attention to how your body responds to different foods and adjusting your diet accordingly.
It's about taking control of your own health instead of just blindly following someone else's rules.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk about another controversial topic. Polyphasic sleep.
Oh yeah, that one's a doozy. The idea of reducing your total sleep time by taking multiple naps throughout the day is pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
But is it actually sustainable?
That's the million-dollar question. There are definitely people out there who swear by it. They say it makes them more productive and energetic.
But it seems like it would be incredibly disruptive.
It is. You have to stick to a really strict schedule, and it can really mess with your natural sleep-wake cycle.
Not everyone's body can adapt to that.
Right. Right. It takes a certain type of person to make it work. And even then, there's no guarantee that it's beneficial in the long run.
Yeah, the research on polyphasic sleep is still pretty limited.
It is. We don't really know what the long-term effects are, so it's kind of a gamble.
You might end up feeling amazing or totally burnt out.
Exactly. So if you're thinking about trying it, definitely do your research and proceed with caution.
Okay, good advice. And speaking of things that might make you feel amazing, let's talk about the sex machine protocol.
Ah, yes. The quest for optimal sexual performance.
Ferriss makes some bold claims about this one. Does it really live up to the hype?
Well, like a lot of his strategies, it's based on a combination of anecdotal evidence, personal experimentation, and, a bit of scientific research.
Some of which is more solid than others.
Exactly. So it's not a foolproof system. It's more about, providing a framework for experimentation.
So it's up to each individual to figure out what works best for them.
Right. And as always, it's important to be cautious and talk to your doctor before making any major changes, especially if you're taking medication or have any health concerns.
Safety first.
Always. But even if you don't follow the sex machine protocol to a T, I think there's still value in what Ferriss is saying about the connection between diet, lifestyle, and hormonal health. He emphasizes the importance of things like sleep, stress management, and nutrition.
It's a holistic approach.
Exactly. And it's about taking responsibility for your own sexual well-being instead of just relying on medication or quick fixes.
It's about understanding how all these different factors interact and influence each other. Okay, so we've talked about diet, exercise, sleep, sex. Now let's get into Ferriss's ideas about injury recovery.
Right. He explores some alternative therapies that often get overlooked by conventional medicine. Things like the EGSQ method, active release technique, and prolotherapy.
Yeah, these therapies don't always get a lot of love from mainstream doctors. But Ferriss makes a pretty compelling case for their potential.
He does. He shares a lot of anecdotes and case studies from practitioners who've had success with these methods.
And he's also tried a lot of these therapies himself, right?
Yeah, he talks about his own journey with chronic pain and how these alternative approaches helped him heal. It's pretty inspiring stuff.
It is. It really challenges us to question conventional wisdom and consider all the options that are out there.
It's about being open to possibilities beyond the traditional medical model.
And it's about taking an active role in your own healing process. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the 4-Hour Body, it's clear that it's a book that's full of unconventional wisdom, thought-provoking ideas, and, well, a fair bit of controversy.
It definitely is. It challenges us to rethink what our bodies are capable of and to embrace the power of self-experimentation.
And it reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to health and wellness.
It's a very individualized journey.
Right. What works for one person might not work for another. And that's okay. The key is to find what works best for you. Okay, before we sign off, let's give our listeners a quick recap of the key takeaways from the 4-Hour Body. We'll keep it concise, 10 key points.
Sounds good.
All right, number 1, the minimum effective dose, or MED. It's about finding the sweet spot where you're getting the maximum benefit with the least amount of effort. Number 2, the slow-carb diet. It's a unique approach to fat loss that involves eliminating white carbs, eating the same meals repeatedly, and having a weekly cheat day.
Number 3, self-experimentation. It's about becoming your own scientist, tracking data, and figuring out what works best for your unique body.
Number 4, biohacking. It's about optimizing various aspects of your life through targeted interventions and lifestyle changes.
Number 5, sleep hacking. It's about prioritizing sleep and using techniques and tools like the Zeo sleep monitor to improve sleep quality.
Number 6, polyphasic sleep. It's a more extreme approach to sleep management that involves taking multiple short naps throughout the day instead of one long sleep at night.
Number 7, the sex machine protocol. It's a multifaceted approach to boosting testosterone and enhancing sexual performance through diet, cold exposure, and supplements.
Number 8, reversing injuries. It's about exploring alternative therapies like the EGOSQ method, ART, and prolotherapy to heal injuries that are often considered permanent.
Number 9, cold exposure. It's a surprisingly versatile tool that can help with weight loss, hormone optimization, and even sleep enhancement.
And number 10, challenge assumptions. It's about questioning conventional wisdom and being open to new possibilities, especially when it comes to your health and well-being.
The 4-Hour Body is a book that encourages us to approach our health with a sense of curiosity, skepticism, and, most importantly, a willingness to experiment.
It's an invitation to push boundaries, explore uncharted territories, and discover our true potential. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the 4-Hour Body.
And keep listening to the deep dive.